Months ago, I got an idea that kinda slammed into me like a semi-truck and dragged me down the road for a couple of bumpy miles. It grabbed onto my brain and didn't let go until I had enough concepts for it to drive me crazy and keep me up at night. So, in order to feed the brain demons, I decided to put my other two projects on hold, one of which I'm definitely not procrastinating, definitely not, to smash it out. This is Mukbang. If there's one thing that's a guarantee about human life, it's that we require three basic things to survive: air, water, and food. I eat, you eat, the demons eat, so why not make a game about it? A horror game, that is. A trend that's been around for over a decade or so has been something called mukbang, a portmanteau of the Korean words mungyun, which means eating, and pangjeong, which means broadcast, where people sit down in front of their camera, eat a meal, and then upload it for others to enjoy. In recent years, it's become something of a...
Put it down. Ouch, my finger! You got a wrench on it!
theatrical experience. So the game premise was simple. You're a streamer who sits down once a day to eat food on camera, but the meals you eat start to get a little weird. And therein comes the horror element. Originally, the idea for this came to me the same way some of my other ideas come to me, where I'm sitting at work bored, and I suddenly physically recoil as the universe plucks my brain like a guitar. I just suddenly said out loud to my manager one day if they thought a game where you eventually ate really gross stuff would be fun. She just kinda laughed and told me to get back to work. So I made the game anyway. After writing out a general premise and possible game loop, I usually start out a project with obtaining models or assets, whether that's making them or finding them. I assembled a small hoard of 3D food items to feed the hungry hippos in my computer and got started on a simple model for the apartment. I wanted the player to feel isolated. I built a tiny little studio apartment, crammed it full of basic furniture, and put drapes over the windows. From there, I decided that having a hallway full of apartment doors would be beneficial so that the game didn't feel too small, and modeled that too. Next, I arranged the streaming setup and the in-game laptop. The player is able to access the laptop at any point to see the stream and a few other pages I'd be setting up later for fun. I set up a render texture and another camera so we could get a live feed of the live stream that was visible on multiple sources. By then, I had something workable. I grabbed a first-person controller from Unity's asset store and checked how things looked. Then, after assembling the various foods in their groups, I just threw them into the scene for final checks and painstakingly went through over 150 models to check and assign and sometimes fix or remake materials. Kit bashing different asset packs or using free assets is a great time saver, but oftentimes comes with problems like missing or reverse textures, flip normals that require fixing in Blender, or sometimes don't even have the model in them at all, which is always a fun surprise. When that was done, I took a break from 3D work and got started on the UI elements for the laptop. I needed 3 screens: the main streaming site, a secondary page to the streaming site where you could check poll options for the next meal, and then just the general desktop page. Since the desktop page was just going to be a single image with 2 icons on it, I worked on the streaming pages first. On the main page, you can see the stream through the render texture that we set up earlier, as well as a little chat section. I did want to have each chat message appear as the player ate, but by the time I got to the point where this was feasible, I just wasn't certain on implementing it. I had dozens of scripts already handling different things, so at the time of writing this, when you finish a meal in-game, the entire chat will appear on the page next to the stream. On the polling page, 3 random options will be displayed for the potential next meal, as well as random donation images that change each time you check the page. After that, I made small UI things for endgame content like error messages and tutorials, located a font I wanted to use for the text in-game, and then eventually went back to working with the 3D models, moving them into tasteful, edible arrangements for the player's viewing and eating pleasure. Now it was time to get pretty serious about scripting. This time, I came prepared with a diagram that I definitely didn't draw only when I remembered it halfway through making the game, because I definitely learned from my mistakes. Tony Stark could take a page out of my book. Similar to my game The Hippo, or any game really, Mukbang had scripts that relied on each other. So when you sit down, it would trigger a boolean, which is a true or false statement. So if you were sitting, which means sitting equals true, you could eat food. If you were no longer sitting, which means sitting equals false, you could not eat food. When you were sitting, several other things needed to happen as well that only happened when you were sitting, like the door blowing open in the wind, yawn-orama, or spooky laptop hijinks, or strange sounds. You know, perfectly normal apartment things. I needed scripts for using the laptop without accidentally sitting down, or standing up without accidentally using the laptop. The player needed to be able to get through the door without phasing through it like a cryptid, and there needed to be spooks. So I put together a very rough script to sit down and stand up and use the laptop all independently from each other, so there was no funny business. The last time I was in an apartment building, which was entirely too recent for my liking, there was hardwood and tile flooring inside the apartments themselves, but the long, scary, and frankly way too freaking narrow hallways were extremely well lit with a sickly blue lighting and had carpet. So I wanted different step sounds based on what floor you were on. Now, I'm not experienced with surface materials quite yet. I'm told they're easy to use, but the last time I tried to use them was early on in my development of Tardigrade Takeover, which is another game I'm working on that's refreshingly not horror-based, and it didn't work well. Or at all. So instead, to make a clear transition between the carpeted floor of the hall and your hardwood floored apartment, I just made trigger collider boxes that would check what surface you were standing on and change the footstep sound effect based on that. And my motto is to stop working on it the second it works perfectly, because I fear my own hubris and stupidity, and because I will eventually break it in the future. I also needed scripts to track meals and eat food items, and you had to be able to see what kind of food you were looking at to eat. So I threw an identifying script on each food item, and then dragged those food items onto another script on a management object to differentiate the meals from each other. When you eat a collection of scrumptious-looking polygons, the item literally self-deletes itself, and when there's no more of that meal's items left, the meal is done. Then I slapped a white outline on all the items so that you could see what you're looking at, and called it a day. From there, audio was needed. Back a few years ago, I found a piece of room tone ambience that I've been using in projects ever since, and you can pry it from my cold dead hands before I stop using it. Then the apartment around you needed to come to life, so I found sounds for the fridge hum and the laptop fans, and then snapped up some noises for some of the other apartments. If you explore out into the hallway, some of those apartments actually sound lived in, which is important for immersion. Things like baby babble, a dog barking, a woman crying. Yeah, perfectly normal apartment sounds. Then came the time for a part of development that I had been dreading. Eating sounds. This game is about eating, which means that there needs to be eating sounds. Chewing, gulping, slurping, gnashing, crunching. I sat for hours trying to find sounds that worked, and as many of them as I could for variation. Remember when I said that there's over 150 food models? A lot of them were duplicated, and the final count when all meals were taken into consideration was 663 models that I needed sounds on for variation and realism. 663? Is that many? Jesus Christ. That meant over 650 models to have sounds on. Luckily, by selecting multiple models at a time, I could assign them an identifying tag so that I could minimize the actual amount of work it would take to get them their necessary eating-related ear damage. By assigning objects a tag like crunchy or chewy, Unity would check the tag when eating them and then would play a random associated sound from a pool of sounds that I'd scripted, so that the chewing noise was varied and different each time you ate something. In the end, this particular section of development was kind of like procrastinating that one thing you don't want to do, and then once you actually buck up the courage to do it months later, it actually takes 5 minutes. And have we learned our lesson? No, I haven't. From here on out, it was time for little changes and adjustments. I had to fix some spooky scripts because some of them would just go off without other prerequisites in place. For instance, a lot of the scares are only supposed to happen when you're sitting, but my spooky door opening on its own script would just go without warning whenever it wanted, which realistically is actually more frightening. So when I was playtesting, it made for a really disturbing experience. Some of the other scares didn't happen enough or went off at the wrong times, so I had to adjust their percentages of appearing or just fix how they worked in general. It wasn't until most of the game was done that I realized that I didn't like my original idea of prompts appearing when you could interact with things. I wanted some things to be clear, but other things to be vague, so I set up a minor tutorial when you first enter the game that teaches you basics. E to use, F to eat. No prompts, you just gotta see what works and run around the apartment spamming E until something happens. Which, arguably there isn't much, but that's for me to know. Then there was endgame content. I recorded a few voice lines, made them spoopy, and set up some coroutines, which is basically a bit of script that does things one at a time in an orderly fashion. So that coroutine followed the player around until you do what you're told, and the game is done. I finished Mukbang in September 2025 after spending roughly only 7 to 8 weeks on it, including the time it took me to assemble models and playtest. I was planning on releasing it alongside 3 other games that I'd planned to make and put out this year, but so far, it looks like Mukbang and the Hippo will be the only additions to my roster this year. I don't even want to talk about rainbow harpies. Don't look at me. I'll get it done eventually, okay? Just thinking about it makes me want to put my hands in a compost bin. This game was a fun little side project that really only challenged me in a few ways, the most notable being the laptop. It was a weird combination of 3D environment interacting with 2D elements. I'd never used Unity's event system quite like this before, where you had to pass real-world mouse information to the script and elements in the game so that it actually acted and behaved like a real computer inside of the game, inside of my computer. As well, I had a problem with the original interaction I'd set up with the laptop. I had programmed a LERP, which is short form for linear interpolation. Simply put, it made it so that the player camera smoothly transitioned to a defined spot so that you could look at and use the laptop, and then when you were done, it would smoothly slide back to its original place. I must have written this script 100 times and kept screwing it up somehow and couldn't figure it out. The camera would settle weirdly and off-center. Sometimes it wouldn't stop moving and would just slowly rotate on an axis. Sometimes the entire apartment would fly by and I'd just have an out-of-body experience within the game. Eventually, I settled on just setting up a different camera in front of the laptop and switching which camera was active, which was disappointing, but it was a cleaner and simpler script and actually freaking worked. So, I've made decent progress on another side project I might be able to finish by the end of the year. So if you're interested in funny, interactive little visual novels, please keep your eyes, ears, and hands open so I can yuck that at you guys probably around Christmas. I don't have many visual novel ideas left, maybe 2 or 3, but I'll slowly be sprinkling those out between 3D projects, which I have plenty of if my project management Trello board is to be believed. Or feared. Feared is more likely. I get a new idea once a month these days, and it's all I can do to not have 100 Unity projects started. Don't look at that. That's nothing, I promise. Nothing to see here. Move along. Hey, don't look at me like that. Look, it's not you, it's me. You know that saying, familiarity breeds contempt? There's a reason games shouldn't take 5 years to do. Oh, no, don't. Stop that. Hey, quit it. Alright. Okay. I said okay. Rainbow Harpies is still being worked on. I'm not giving up on it, despite the multitudinous problems that I have with it. I'm gonna finish it. At this point, I don't know when. Me releasing the Hippo and Mukbang is proof that I can start, work on, and finish projects. And my mom didn't raise a quitter, so if anyone out there is still waiting on Rainbow Heartbeats, I'm so sorry. Please be patient with me. I promise I'll finish it someday. Mukbang, along with all my other games, is currently available on itch.io. There's a link in the description. You can check me out on X at Opalizard or at @noncheese. Sometimes I post something relevant. Then there's my YouTube, where I post teasers, trailers, bugs, funnies, and spotlights of current projects or upcoming games. Lastly, there's my itch.io page, where you can click around and find some of my other projects I'm working on or have completed, including the Hippo, and a project I have not yet made a page for but am announcing here called Knickers and Knots, a visual novel where you play as a person who's recently purchased a house that's filled with underwear. That's it. I'm not elaborating on that one further because it's more fun that way. Thanks for watching.